the back in this white t-shirt here, please. Thank you.
And I've just got another question about drivers, actually, following on from my last one. You guys have obviously been around a bit.
Not that long.
What do you make of the kind of current generation of drivers compared to when you guys were kind of at your peak and operating years and years ago? I suppose it can follow through to Lee as well, just which the kind of cool drivers away from the cameras, and are they all kind of robotic in front of the cameras and different behind?
Well, our drivers didn't have the communication skills that the current drivers got because they're basically tutored.
Kimi right.
Well, Kimi has got communication skills,
no, I know.
but you have to bleep them out all the time. And Formula One, let's say when I started in the early 70s and ended in the early 80s, is an entirely different world to the one that we're currently enjoying. So we didn't have the technology, we didn't have the safety. What we had was what we thought was the best. But in terms of the media support, I mean, Formula One and television only really came alive, I suppose, at the back end of the 70s. And then it sort of grew and grew with BBC, and then eventually the expansion of television as we know it today. In terms of driving the cars, we had a different car. We had a car which had one set of tyres. The first race I won was in Austria, 76. Goodyear provided the tyres. They were cross-ply tyres. They were like concrete and clay. Out of the sets of tyres that we had in Austria, we had one set of tyres that was probably the best match set of tyres I ever had from Goodyear. Went to Holland the following Grand Prix and couldn't find the car balance that we had in Austria. And Roger Penske, the team boss, turned round to Jerry, who looked after the tyres, and said, "Jerry, have you those tyres from Austria?" And Jerry said, "Yeah, they're in the back of the truck, they'll put them on the car." And the car came alive. It was just a set of tyres that worked in one Grand Prix, so they'd done a bit of qualifying, the entire Grand Prix, put them on in Holland, did the rest of the qualifying and the Grand Prix. So that probably sums up to me the differences where Formula One was in the middle 70s to where we are today. It's just a day and night difference.
I mean, I think for me, I think whichever era you're talking about, great drivers are great drivers. And I think whichever era they came alive in, they would have been great drivers. But if I look at Formula One today, and I've been fortunate as a FIA driver steward now, I've been around the last 2 years now going to Grand Prix, and I am just stunned by the commitment that these guys give these cars in the corners, braking. They're just absolutely phenomenal. Watching here at Silverstone is going to be pretty cool. But I just think that people have got to remember that no matter which era they were driving in, great drivers will always be great drivers. And at the moment, we are so lucky with the drivers we've got. I've heard a lot of talk tonight about DRS and everything. The racing this year has been fantastic. I think it's been great to watch. It's brought new people to our sport. Silverstone is sold out. We've even built new grandstands to bring more people into the circuit. So, you know, it's great racing, it's great television, it's unpredictable, and I'm just really enjoying today's racing. I think it's fantastic.
Would you like to race in today's era?
I would, yes, because I would be 30 years younger than what I am now. But yeah, I don't care which era it is, John. I just think that being a racing driver is a privilege and a pleasure. It's something that I got great satisfaction from. Would I like to be driving now? Absolutely. You know, these cars are good, they're quick. And
safe.
Yeah, but they're very safe, of course, yeah. But the most important thing, and the luckiest thing they have, is they can run the entire Grand Prix flat out. And back in the day, and I don't like saying that very often, but back in the day, John is right, we had one set of tyres, we had to save fuel at the end of the race with the turbochargers, it was sometimes not a happy situation to be in because you couldn't drive at 100% for the whole Grand Prix. These guys today can, and I think that's it's something I would like to do, absolutely, yes.
Okay, more questions. This gentleman here in the white.
Derek, really, it's a question for you. You touched on safety earlier on. Obviously, you were driving quite a difficult era, safety-wise. Taking you back to sort of Jerez in 1990, when obviously your teammate had a really horrific accident. What is it like from your perspective to actually get into a car after you've seen something like that happen to your teammate? What is it like from a psychological point of view to get in the same sort of car that, you know, and you're going out on the track and you know that is the potential?
If I leave Jerez to one side for a minute, I think most racing drivers have this weird situation where, if I take myself, for example, I'm a very soft, gentle person. I get very emotional about different things. But when I'm in a race car, I'm doing my job. And I was there when Villeneuve was killed and a lot of other people were killed. And you woke up the next morning and went racing. You were able to detach yourself from the emotion of that event. When my little brother was killed in F3000, I had to get the courage to get back into a car after promising family members that I wouldn't race again. And that took a lot of guts, determination, focus, and everything. We have a little safe in the back of our mind, and in that safe you will be able to unlock and put things in, like the death of your brother, the death of Villeneuve, etc., etc. You would lock that safe up, and you wouldn't open it again until Monday morning. And I think that's what brought you through the weekend. But when you talk about Jerez, it was quite a different situation, because we knew the Lotus was not very safe. We knew that it kept on breaking. It broke for me at Monza, and obviously it broke at Jerez with Martin Donnelly. And when I left the circuit that night, Martin was not going to make the next day, for sure. So I had a serious conversation with my family, and by the time I got to the circuit the next morning, we were not racing. I'd made the decision not to race. But when you got there, you realised that your mechanics worked all night. They put some titanium plates in the front of the bulkhead, and they stiffened the car up. And I took them to one side and I said, "Is the car safe?" And they said yes. And you have to have that confidence in your mechanics, your engineers, your team, etc., etc., that they're not going to put you out onto the circuit with a car that's going to break or is unsafe. And I changed my mind, and also Lotus were going through a financial crisis at that time, and I think if I had not raced that day, or practiced, or qualified, sorry, that day, and raced on the Sunday, they may not have been around any longer. So there was a hell of a lot of pressure and commitment on me. But that first lap in the car, going through the corner where I helped to pick Martin up off the circuit, was flat. My first flying lap was flat. Again, I put Martin in that little safe in the back of my head, ignored all the dangers, and you went out there and did your job. And I think, again, that's just different racing philosophy than what the drivers today. And I see a lot of the racing today, the drivers taking a few more liberties than what we would have done in our days, just because we had more respect for our fellow drivers.
I learned a very good lesson in 1973 at the US Grand Prix, when during practice or qualifying, I'm not certain, tragically Francois Cervert was killed in a pretty violent accident going through the S's. So the circuit was shut down. It was going to be Sir Jackie Stewart, or Jackie Stewart as he is to his friends, his last Grand Prix in his third World Championship. And everybody was standing around in the pit lane, and then the circuit was reopened. And at that point, I was in at Brabham, it was the third Brabham for that final Grand Prix of the year. And I didn't know how to deal with the situation, because Francois was a lovely, lovely guy. And out of respect, I thought maybe that qualifying or practice would be cancelled. But the track was opened. And Bernie came up to me and he said, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" Yeah. No. I said, "Well, you know, what am I going to do?" Yeah, Francois had this terror. "Get in the car. Get in the car. Never forget that you, Francois, or any other driver out there is doing the one thing in the world that you want to do more than anything else in the world." Sadly, he died, but he died probably very quickly. Probably maybe didn't have a lot to know, didn't know what was happening. But up to the millisecond when the accident occurred, he was living his life the way he wanted to live it. And it made me realise that you've got to create this detachment, the emotional detachment that Derek's talked about, to get into the car, go out and do what you're there. You're a racing driver, and if you can't deal with those emotional pressures, then you shouldn't be in a racing car. And in a more, not recent situation, but when Gilles Villeneuve had his accident in Belgium, Derek, I think, was the first car to come to the scene of the incident, and I came along pretty shortly afterwards. And I'd learned my lesson from 9 years earlier. Got out of the car, Derek was over looking at tragically a body, which was Gilles Villeneuve. Looked at it, realised that in reality he had lost his life, got back into my car, got back to the pits, and as a very matter-of-factly, said to the team, there's been an accident, Villeneuve is dead. And as callous or cruel or uncaring as it may seem, if you haven't got that capacity, you shouldn't be in the job. Fortunately today we don't have those situations, but today there was a situation where a young girl was doing a very fundamental test at an airfield, not a racetrack, at an airfield. Now ordinarily, you don't get into a Grand Prix car today unless there are a minimum standard of safety, be it medical, marshalling, whatever it takes. Yet in these sort of off tests where you're doing either filming or maybe you're just doing an aero test up and down the straight, it appears that you came into the area where the cars were being pitted, something occurred and the car suddenly pushed forward and she ran into the tailgate of the transporter. So that even today, with the safety that we've got, there are still issues which can occur, which can be beyond a driver's control. But the core for me is to have the ability to detach the emotion. You know you're doing a job that's potentially dangerous to you or any one of your colleagues. If you can't deal with it, then you shouldn't be in a car.
You've got to remember also that you've got family and friends around you that just do not understand what you're going through, and they don't understand that you can detach yourself the way you did. Like John just said at the Villeneuve incident in Belgium, I remember getting back in my car, going back to the pits, and I just cried and cried and cried. I got back to the hotel that night, we went out, had something to eat, got up the next morning, washed, showered, and going to the circuit. And my wife said, "What are you doing?" I said, "It's race day." She said, "Surely you're not racing. Surely, you know, we know that Gilles passed away during the night. You can't go racing." And she wouldn't come to the circuit, and she completely, from that day on, lost her love for the sport because she couldn't understand what we have to do as drivers. And I think that's just, it's something we were brought up with, I suppose. It was a dangerous era, and we were brought up with it, and we understood the dangers, accepted the dangers, and we were at the start of carbon fibre chassis that were like eggshells. You know, if you touch things, they would just snap in half. You know, now we watch these cars bounce off barriers, go upside down, do like Webber did at Valencia or something, and just get out the car and run back to the pit. So, you know, they are this is a very fortunate time for racing drivers, I think.